Hello everyone, this is Alexandre from Gains, and today I am joined by Michael Chen from Fantom. How are you doing, Michael?
Hey, Alex. Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
All right, it's a pleasure. Fantom is actually one of the kind of OG projects in crypto nowadays. You've been in the space for a few years and we've been in touch, so I'm happy to have this discussion so that we can learn more about Fantom. First of all, I'd like to learn more about you. What did you do before crypto? Did you work with any other project? How did you come into crypto?
Well, before we even start, right? Like, I didn't know we were already OG, man. Like, we've been around for two and a
I
half
mean,
years, I think now. I still remember MadeSafe Coin and all that stuff, right? Obviously, none of that's still alive. So I guess we could say we are alive and we've been around, but I wouldn't say OG. But if I would describe a little bit about how I came into the space and what I've been doing before I joined Fantom, right? Is well, I was still studying shortly before I actually went into crypto, right? So I was at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam doing tax and economics and law, double bachelor's, double undergrad. I kind of left all of that behind to pursue this career, right? I mean, it was 2017. ICOs were a thing, bullrun was a thing, and a lot of people left their previous careers behind because honestly, people came in here for the money sometimes, and then when they realized the tech was really good, they stayed. And I think I was one of those people. So I'd say about my first BTC in 2016, very passively, didn't do much. But in 2017, I think around the time QuantStamp did their ICO, I decided, fuck it, I'm going full time. Right, this is amazing. So, yeah, that's kind of where I come from, right? And I guess in 2017, I was more active as an investor, as a retail investor, so to say. And 2018, early on, I started helping out a lot of projects on the marketing side. So before Fantom, I helped a couple of 50 projects in China. Left those because I didn't like the working dynamic. And I think around April 2018, I found Fantom before the white paper was even out. I was very intrigued by the value proposition, and I said, "Hey, I want to be part of this. I'm gonna help you out for free. I'm gonna give you some money. I'm gonna, get into the private sale, and I'm gonna be like an extension of your team, and I'm not gonna really need to ask for payment or any of that." And well, that's led to me actually becoming a part of the team then a couple of months later. And now, fast forward 2.5 years, I am the chief marketing officer. I'm still around, still active here day to day, and very excited about that.
yeah. I mean, there's only a few people that are able to do what you've done, which is starting to work for free for a project and then being good enough and having a great synergy with the team to then become a full-time paid member of the team. And I think that's a great way of approaching things, and not many people do it. I mean, when you don't have that experience, you're young but you can be very good. That's sometimes something you have to do, and so it's something I just really like. um, anyway, so what's Fantom in a few words for people who don't know what it is?
Well, I mean, Phantom started a lot of soul searching in the past few years. So if you look at where Phantom started, it was one thing, which was asynchronous BFD, consensus that scales not just in adversarial environments, but also loosely connected environments, say nodes go offline and so forth. So I think that's where Phantom started out. But I think after launching mainnet, we realized, hey, I mean, you can have awesome consensus, but you need to have a killer app to illustrate what that consensus can do. And I think our heavyweight has been in decentralized finance ever since. So we've been building that since January 2020, about 9 months now, and delivered that stack. Well, I've part of that stack recently with FMint launching, which is our collateralization module in which people can collateralize FTM, and Mint FUSD, which is our native stablecoin. And
Right, so that's
if
yield
people
farming.
well, yield
Not really.
farming is a very general term, right? I mean, you can farm when there's yield opportunity, right? So when providing liquidity or when buying certain stable coin, well, gives you sick gains, so to say, just to stay in team with this channel. Then we have a yield farm, right? We provide shitcoin A and B or stablecoin A and B, put them in Uniswap, put them up against each other, and we get artificial money C. And that's usually how it looks like in Curve and Swerve in any of these farms. Right now with Fantom, we just have WFTM being collateralized and FUSD being minted, right? There's no other yield opportunity. Yeah, sure, people get incentives for having a well collateralized position, but that's about it. There's no incentivized liquidity as of now.
All right, got it. So initially, Phantom was like a high performance blockchain, or do you want to call it blockchain or something else?
I mean, high performance blockchain is actually the name of a project, so I never call it a high performance
Oh,
blockchain. But I mean, I would say it's still quite high performance. It still works really well. I think we're very proud of the work and research we've done together. We had quite a helping hand from Andre in the first year or first 1.5 years in building it. Actually, I still remember up to testnet, he was doing a lot of contributions before we really nailed down a strong technical team like that could actually build consensus and architect it out themselves. And they've been updating it and helping the validators upgrade ever since. So yeah, very happy with the network performance, honestly. But we
cool.
could have some more validators really, because right now we're sitting around 35 or 40 validators. And obviously for decentralization purposes, you would like to see a bit more and you would like to see people participate actively in governance as well, right? And not just say, hey, we trust the foundation to do what's right, and to propose and vote and so forth. No, like that's not going to work in the longer term.
Cool. So if someone wants to become a validator, how hard or how easy is it? Um, do they need a certain amount of tokens to stake? What are the rewards? How does it work?
So yeah, we have a minimum entry barrier for validator participation. So a validator needs 3,175,000 FPM to even start up a validator, which is about $110,000 from the top of my head in the current market. Well, reason for that is obviously right. If you're gonna get a lot of delegation, you need to have some of your own skin in the game, and obviously you're paying DevOps costs, you're paying for your server and so forth, and may probably have a few employees who help with the security of the actual node, right? But even then, there has to be disincentive on the other side of incentive, right? Because the thing is, in networks where where there's no slashing, where there's no disincentive, right? People have no reason necessarily to do the good thing when the bad thing, when the malicious behavior has a much higher reward, and they're not punished for it, right? So on one hand, staking, if you look at it, is on one hand an incentive for good behavior, but there's also a flip side, disincentive for bad behavior. So that's why I think staking's really been ruined by a lot of projects in the space, right? Because a lot of people are just giving interest without any slashing and without really any utility. Because a lot of dApps who don't need network security because they're on ETH anyways, and ETH delivers a certain level of network security, are implementing staking, which is just a name for giving people interest so they don't get classified as a security. But I regress.
All right. So all right, you've laid the ground. So you built with a very great technical team a high performance blockchain, and then you're building an ecosystem around it on the DeFi side, and you also have some real use cases. So I think let's talk about DeFi and go over the different products you have. So you mentioned people can stake FTM, wrap it with WFTM, and then they mint a stablecoin, FUSD, which is the name for your stablecoin. And then what are the other use cases, DeFi use cases that you have in the ecosystem?
We envisioned for the entire stack. So when we wanted to start building this, we had three key components, which is one is fmint, which we already have right now, which is live, and the other two were fswap and flend. And flend is essentially a lending protocol, similar to Aave and Compound in terms of architecture and functionality, to allow yield opportunity. And fswap is essentially a, well, let's say more of a Uniswap like application to allow base liquidity layer on top of our network, right? Because right now you have FUSD, but you can't really trade it out to anything, right? Like you can't trade it out to the synthetics because we were gonna introduce synthetic assets, right? We can't trade it to FTM. Like you can't really do anything with it. It's just nice to have right now. You can only mint it and repay it currently. So right now it's not very useful yet. And I think if you want your DeFi ecosystem to be more than a value vacuum, you need to start first of all adding more and more ecosystem tools to the ecosystem. And secondly, you need to bridge to where the users are. And in our case, well, we see that most of DeFi's users are on Ethereum. I think DeFi in general is an Ethereum narrative. So we're going to be porting FUSD to Ethereum as well when the bridges are ready.
All right, sounds good. And so, how many people are trying out the mint thing? How many people are interested in this? Do you have some numbers on the volume? All this.
Yeah, I think we have around $10 million locked into the protocol right now. So $10 million worth of FTM, say average collateralization ratio 600, 650%. I guess a bit more than $1 million of FUSD minted on that 10 mil. So, I mean, pretty good knowing that FUSD doesn't have yield opportunity yet. That staking actually has higher financial incentive than minting FUSD, but people are just really, really keen to interact with these new products. So in that way, I think we have a really cool community going on.
All right, pretty cool. And just to finish on how much is staked overall, because the normal staking and the staking to mint are different things, right?
Yeah, so for now, normal staking is for network security. So you run a validator or you delegate to a validator, right? You put up X amount of tokens. Based on that, we calculate the rewards ratio, right? For validators higher than delegators, because delegators are obviously paying the delegation fee to the validator. And in the DeFi stack, in FMint, the only incentive you get is for having a healthy position. So we said, okay, right now we don't have a hard liquidation or auction module yet. So when people go under a certain level of collateral, their FTM isn't sold yet. Like that's gonna come later because we want to gradually introduce functionality. For now, what happens if you go under a certain percentage, your FTM is locked, but your FUSD can still move around, right? So what we said is, okay, obviously we don't want to introduce hard liquidations yet because we want to test the robustness of the system first, but we don't want people to have really badly collateralized positions either. So how do we make people collateralize well when there's no real risk of hard liquidation? So then we put incentives on the other side to be in the safe zone.
Right, so this is why you have a very, very high number for the collateralization, the over collateralization.
Yeah, yeah. Although I don't think it's very, very high. I mean, 600%. I think it's reasonable for a well less liquid asset than say Ethereum, Bitcoin, or any of that, right? I mean, in MakerDAO, they can afford lower collateralization ratios because, well, obviously Ethereum's market cap and liquidity is hundreds or thousand-fold that of FTM. I mean, I think synthetics for SNX has 700% or even more collateralization ratio as well. So I think it's very reasonable.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so I mean, the DeFi space is very exciting, but what I'm very interesting about also are the real use cases. And you have something quite unique in crypto is that you're working a lot with Afghanistan. So I'm very curious why Afghanistan? How did that partnership come? And what are you doing with Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think Afghanistan is something we really rolled into. I think we're also the only blockchain company that's actually active in the area when we speak to the ministry and so forth. So that's pretty cool. I guess it was a natural result, I guess, of one of our BD guys, Barak, from Afghanistan himself, his family, and his colleagues and so forth being well connected there. And well, the region has obviously had a pretty tough 20 years, I'd say, right? With military involvement from other countries, with terrorism and so forth. So a lot of Afghans left Afghanistan to get educated elsewhere, right? They went to Europe, to America, and so forth. And now that everything's calmed down a little bit, a lot of those people have been coming back to Afghanistan and saying, okay, let's fix the problems in their country. I mean, they missed a lot of the Web 2 revolution, right? Because of all the troubles they had. They're using a lot of legacy systems or pre-legacy systems, so to say. So when it comes to integration of new tech, so let's say Web 3.0, they can skip that entire Web 2.0 revolution, right? Like they don't need to figure out how their old systems fit with like blockchain technology. Like, no, they don't even have those systems. So they're just going from scratch. They're going from analog to digital finally. So that by itself is already a huge improvement. And it may not necessarily be blockchain related. It's just about them wanting the newest of technologies.
That's great. What are you doing to help Afghanistan with blockchain tech?
So I think the only one that's public now is the Ministry of Health. So I think we announced a collaboration with them later last year, and we actually started out rolling out a pilot this year where we labeled 80,000 pieces of medication with QR codes, and which would be scanned on every single checkpoint. So as soon as it entered the country from the manufacturer, when it went to the pharmacies, and when it went to the customer, right, to track its cycle of life, to see if it had been tampered with, and so forth, because they were dealing with a counterfeit medication problem. So where a pretty big part of all the normal antivirals and medication being sold to people were fake, right? And obviously, if you have a chronic disease and you're buying a fake antiviral or placebo, that's gonna get pretty bad in a couple of years. Like, that's really horrible. So that was one low-hanging fruit, like a problem we thought we could solve, because we had a good partner we found during one of our accelerator events last year in South Africa, like Africa Arena. We found a company called Checkit, and they were working with a German label producer on building out this solution. And I think they pitched us the POC last year, and it's in production. So yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
been the first use case for Afghanistan. But yeah, I think I'll cut it off there because I don't think I'm allowed to say more than that. So thank you.
All right. There's something I've always been wondering about when talking about real physical use cases of blockchain like QR codes. Is, I mean, of course, maybe I'm a bit too paranoid, but someone could imagine that the people who use to make money off of selling counterfeit drugs could maybe take advantage of the imagined new security that these QR codes give, and maybe they
Yeah.
take a pictures of the QR codes and they make a new box and put the fake medicine in the new box, like glue the picture of the real QR code that says the drug is legit, and then make the fake drug pass as legit. What do you think about this?
I mean, obviously, I'm going to say, like, a system like this is not going to be perfect, first of all, right? Like, I think for large scale counterfeit productions and like really sophisticated operations, it's going to have a tough time to actually shut it down, but it's going to make it more difficult. But I think for a lot of the small timers, it really shuts them down. Those who are not as sophisticated, not as, I wouldn't say intelligent, but not as, balls deep into this as the large scale productions. But I think at the very least, if you make it more difficult or if you keep switching up the formats, that's already a good step. Even then, right? Let's say you copy a QR code, right? And you refabricate a box, make your own labels, and put the QR code on top of those boxes. What if they are scanned in multiple times? Because they actually have to be sold through a pharmacy, right? And you can actually see when they've been scanned in at a pharmacy, right? Like if a QR code has been scanned in multiple times, that's already shady, right? Like you shouldn't be using it at that point.
All right, I guess so, yeah. Or
Yeah.
they would need like to have an accomplice in the pharmacy
Um,
or something. But
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, you know what it is. I hear about
yeah,
people buying medication not from pharmacies but from their friends. I mean, I'm here in the Netherlands, and people trust each other a little bit too much. No, just kidding. But I can see where the problem is a little bit, right? Like obviously word of mouth, people trust each other, they buy stuff in places where they shouldn't be buying specific stuff. And that's where it usually goes wrong, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. I agree that it's gonna make things more difficult for the bad guys, which is great. I'm just like trying to push the idea and to see how resistant it can be against, attackers that have more resources, like you said, like large scale
Yeah.
counterfeit drugs. But
I don't think it just applies to drugs, right? I think it applies to any kind of supply chain tracking solution, right? Anti-counterfeiting with clothes, with sneakers, with whatsoever, right? The best way to control it is if you control the entire supply chain, right? So if you're, for example, you're an Adidas, like the sneaker producer, and you control production, you have your own brick and mortar stores and so forth, then it becomes so much easier, right? But as soon as there's 20 different middlemen in between, there's pharmacies that are not nationally regulated, producers in a different country, you have corruption at other checkpoints as well, then, it doesn't become very effective, so to say. So there are also other problems to solve. But it's a step in the right direction, and it's an attempt, I'd say. So that's good.
yeah, I like it. Agreed. All right. So maybe I was a bit too forward in the beginning of the video saying you were an OG, but you've been around for like 2.5 years or something. Or
Fantom, yeah. Fantom for 2.5 years, yeah.
yeah. And so you had an ICO. How much did you raise? How much of the money is left? Many projects, as you're well familiar with, they kept the ETH they raised, and now ETH has gone down in value a lot, maybe. And I'm asking this question because if you're interested in Ferrum, if you're a holder, you want to know that you have decent cash reserves to be able to sustain the project and keep on building for some time, because cash is king.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I have the precise numbers right now. Like I think we did a disclosure with Masari in 2019. We did a disclosure this year on our own media with more precise numbers and runway. Let's get back to the beginning. I mean, we raised quite a significant amount of ETH back in 2018, let's say June, May, July. And well, obviously, we did hold on to a lot of that ETH, and obviously, that did go down quite a bit. I mean, if you look at the status on ICO drops, we officially raised $39.8 million, but that was all in ETH, like no USDT or USDC or so forth was accepted. So, well, you can calculate when we started raising, ETH was at $700, $800, I think. When we finished raising, ETH was at four something, right? And after that, it took an even harder beating. And we didn't have a dedicated treasury management back then, and we had quite some trouble with that because obviously starting out you have a lot of the startup problems. We had high burn rates, we had a physical office, we didn't necessarily have fully efficient teams, 10 people in marketing, of a job that could be done by one or two people, and after which I only did on my own after a certain point. We had more principal researchers and developers than we necessarily needed at that stage in time, even though we're shorthanded now. We had too many back then. Things weren't ideal, I think, 2018 and early 2019. I'd say the burn rate from then has gone down significantly. So last time I checked the burn rate, we were at about $130,000 a month. From based on our earlier disclosure this year, that puts us at 4 or 5 years of runway, maybe more now, because we've been allocating our treasury to a lot of yield farms, allocating to DeFi protocols such as Yearn to make sure that they're not sitting idly, but we've also diversified them to make sure that we don't have the maximized amount of protocol risk.
All right, cool. And I have to say, I really appreciate the transparency and you telling us how hectic it was back in the early days. Some projects would just like go over this and not mention it because they would be afraid that it would look bad. But I think it's very normal, and it goes to show how much the company or the foundation has evolved. So it's good to see the progress.
I mean, like, sorry to cut you off, by the way.
Yeah.
If I had more precise numbers, I would share them right now. but obviously we plan to do a financial disclosure every single year with the numbers, just to make sure that people still have that confidence, right? Because obviously after that big run up in 2017 and 18, 2 years later, even the most legit projects sometimes struggled for money. I know projects taking out loans right now and so forth. It's not ideal. So for us, we've been pretty risk averse since that first ETH drop. We want to make sure that we conserve all of our money, want to make sure that it goes into the right direction. We've leaned out the entire process. We don't get fooled by fancy schmancy PR firms and consultants, and I guess just use some common sense, right?
Yeah, sure. So it's been interesting hearing about the issues in the early days of what was hard. Are there any issues or problems that are preventing you from doing what you want to do nowadays? Because we'd all love to see adoption for blockchain as a whole, and every project would love to see adoption for their specific project, more users, more volume, more real use cases. What are the issues right now that are preventing maybe crypto as a whole, and more specifically Phantom, from like
Well,
moving forward?
I mean, like, I think a big problem is the lack of reliable bridges now. And obviously, I'm a really big Ren fan. I think they've built fantastic tech. I used their Ren bridge for BTC to Ren BTC and so forth, right? To allow my BTC to be used for yield farming inside of the ETH ecosystem. Because I do believe that most of the network effects, most of the killer apps are all on Ethereum. But obviously, Ethereum is quite congested, and I would like to figure out a way to, not pay thousands of dollars in transaction fees every month. Maybe that's a pretty reasonable request. And well, obviously, a lot of people been saying layer two, layer two, layer two is the future, right? But most of the layer twos I've been interacting with recently, and I'm a big fan of many people's work, of many layer two solutions, they're pretty damn centralized, right? And that doesn't exactly instill confidence in me. I think Andre the other day told me a really fun thing. He said, "Well, why do we need layer two? Like layer one is the new layer two, right?" And I was spending like an entire day thinking, like layer one's the new layer two. What are you meaning, right? And he said, "Well, essentially, if you bridge all the assets into a very reliable layer one with a good validator set, with good network security, with a reliable bridge, how is it any different from a layer two, right?" And I said, "Well, you have a point." And that's kind of the premise I've been working on. So there's been a lot of good research in the layer one space in the past few years. You have, well, Avalanche, Phantom, Algorand, and a couple others, Polkadot, for example. But compared to the amount of layer ones that did a raise and started building, the amount of bridges and reliable bridges is very low. I mean, the only ones I can think of are Ren, maybe AnySwap, I guess. They're doing pretty cool stuff with the TCRM, and Keep Network with their TBTC, but I'm not sure where the progress is there now because I think they had an exploit before and they had to shut it down. But aside from that, not many options come to mind except for a lot of decentralized custodial bridges. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's one really big problem, right, in making anything work, it's really the lack of bridges.
Let me see what else we haven't covered. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I mean, I would like to backtrack a little bit and speak about the bridges, right? Because a lot of people believe Ren is fully decentralized. A lot of people believe AnySwap is fully decentralized. A lot of people believe in decentralization as in general, right? But the fact is that 99% of projects, right? Even though the protocol would work in a pretty distributed way, the foundation always has to do some kind of bootstrap, right? So a lot of foundations in layer ones run validator nodes. A lot of foundations behind these bridges have to support a lot of the dark nodes, for example, to help make sure that malicious actors don't attack it and ruin the experience early on in early days, because it isn't necessarily safe without foundation engagement, right? And a lot of foundations are pushing forward their governance because governance isn't very active in the early days of most layer ones, right? I mean, if you look at successful governance, I think the only successful and organic governance that's been around till now, it's been on DeFi protocols in Ethereum, right? I mean, if you look at other layer ones like Cosmos, most governance and most token forums is interchain foundation members or ex-interchain foundation members, right? Like the guys I see active are Zaki Manian, Sunny Agarwal, Jaquan, and so forth. But how many like separate blockchain developers or individuals are actually participating, right? So I think the big problem right now is a lot of people are preaching decentralization, but they aren't really doing their part. They aren't engaging too much. They are leaving it to the rest, right? It's that decentralization and governance is that thing, just like staking, that we want everyone else to do because it's good, but we don't really feel like doing it ourselves, or we are maybe a little bit too lazy. And
Do
I think that's very
you
sad.
is Phantom thinking about becoming a DAO?
Well, I mean, DAO has become a buzzword kind of. So let me say we plan to integrate on-chain governance because it's good for decentralization purposes. And obviously, you don't want to be classified as a security in the future. So that's essential. Are we planning to specifically open a decentralized autonomous organization? I don't know. Like one step at a time, dude.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So yeah, maybe would you like to talk about your partnerships? You've partnered with Waves, you with Band Protocol for Oracles. What are these guys bringing you in cryptos? Many of for new people, lots of partnerships. They're just partnerships for marketing. You're a marketing guy. Are these partnerships real or is it just marketing, Michael?
I don't consider myself a marketing guy. I feel like
Okay.
as any Phantom community member, Simone is the marketing guy. I'm a fudder apparently, but
Yeah.
sorry. So like, I'd say that if you look at the partnerships from the earlier days, a lot of it was less reliable. We had a bit different BD team that didn't communicate as well at the time, and we sometimes had partnership that didn't necessarily end up in the right place. But if you look at anything we sign these days, we're always very specific in our first conversation. Hey, can you technically integrate? Because if we can technically integrate, we can market. We don't want to be disappointing people. We don't want to, you know, mess with community perception, right? And safe that we're doing things that we're not doing. So to grab back to like for example Band and Waves, Band is actually one of my favorite partnerships. I've known Kevin for a while now, and Sorvis, Sorwit, Paul, and so forth. They've been really awesome, right? So when we initially started testing out FMint, we were using a centralized Oracle and testnet. So we just had a simple API that was pulling FTM price feeds from Binance and just feeding it to FMint. And well, obviously, both the Chainlink team and the Band team were saying, "Dude, that's horrible. Please do not use the centralized Oracle." And we said, "Yeah, sure. Like if you integrate, we will not use the centralized Oracle." And they integrated. They created a bridge contract to make sure that we could pull the oracles from the Band chain to our chain, and they've been really helpful because they didn't just deploy oracles for wrapped FTM, FUSD, and FTM, but they also deployed other oracles for us on Ethereum, such as the total supply of FUSD. They're getting us oracles for the synthetics, like for oil, for any other kind of assets or commodities. And really, they've been really awesome on the marketing front as well. And now going back to marketing, I guess, they said whenever they have PR opportunities, they let us know and they include us. They include us in a lot of the AMAs and a lot of the collaborations with some influencers. I guess in that direction, I don't consider them partners. I almost consider them friends, so to say, like very casual crypto friends.
All right. And what about Waves?
Like with the Waves guys, they really wanted to push Gravity, which is their new interoperability solution, and they're going to be building bridges. And obviously, we need bridges. I'm really familiar with their principal architect behind Gravity called Alexei Kupishev. He's a really good buddy. And well, he said, "Hey, Michael, one of the first blockchains we want to integrate is Phantom, right? After the likes of Polkadot, Tezos, Cardano." I said, "Well, like if you're going to be integrating all those big ones first, it would be great to be in that same line, right? And I know they are pretty far along with their development. Like if you look at their GitHub, if you look at their research. So we partnered on the premise that they would do a lot of the integration work. And that was really fantastic, right? Because obviously we are understaffed right now. We're looking for a lot of Solidity developers. So if you are a Solidity developer, hit us up. And it's always good to have external teams actually providing their resources, because Waves is actually a really big organization, right? They've been around since 2016. They have a bigger treasury, bigger war chest, right? Have like freaking 50 developers, and getting things done goes really quick on that side of things. So it was a really easy thing to put together.
Cool. I'd like to ask you, like, if we could maybe step back, right? So we've laid out Fantom is a pretty interesting project. Again, high
Yes.
performance blockchain, some real use cases with unique partnerships with governments like Afghanistan. You have great relationships with other high quality projects like Waves and Burn Protocol with real integrations. So that's pretty cool. Now, what do you have in mind for the future? What's on the roadmap? How are you going to go to the next level?
How are we going to go to the next level? I mean, the day we port into ETH with FUSD is the day we go to the next level, in my opinion, right? Because let's say you have a big vacuum first, right? Let's say you're in a car and you put your car in air circulation mode, and then you drive into a big green forest and you put it on the air conditioning and you start pulling in that forest air. That's basically what the Ethereum port feels like for me. I'm not sure if that's a good example or analogy, but I mean, I think from a product point of view, the offering is very solid. I mean, FMint is very, very nice to use from a UX point of view, and from a technical point of view, everything's working, right? And all you have to do once you port is to present yield opportunity, incentivize liquidity for FUSD, adding FUSD to as many liquidity pools like lending protocols, stablecoin AMMs, DEXs, and so forth as possible, and just working on validation and people knowing the product. So I think it's a very synthetic slash SUSD like strategy, but unlike them, we do minting and collateralization on our own chain. We're going to be relying a lot on the bridges to facilitate that.
All right. And so, do you have an ETA, or when do you think FUSD is going to be live on Ethereum?
I'm very afraid to say that because obviously I don't know when the bridge is going to be ready. Obviously, we do have our own somewhat custodial bridge, right, that we use for the BEP2 FTM ERC20 swaps that we already had, right? But obviously, that bridge is a little bit problematic. We need to refactor that because it runs out of gas all the time on the Ethereum side of things, and we need to top it up, or it bugs out sometimes, and we get quite some technical support tickets that we need to help people with. So from a user experience point of view, and from a community point of view, that isn't ideal yet. So I think we want to bring FUSD live in Ethereum either when we refactor the custodial bridge in a proper way, or like as a wrapper, right? Or when Ren integrates. But I think Ren is still quite a bit away. They're going to be ready around November, optimistically, January, a little bit more pessimistically. So that's going to take a while.
All right. Since you're in the ecosystem very deeply, you're talking to a lot of projects. I would be very curious to get your take on where you think crypto is going to be, let's say in 3 or 5 years. Like, are we? Because I believe like there might be some great powers, fighting, right? Like the old traditional financial world against what we're doing in crypto, decentralization, more transparency. Do you think crypto is going to take over? Do you think it's still going to stay a niche? Do you think governments will fight it, or will they adopt it like Afghanistan and others?
I mean, you're asking anyone in this space, you're going to get a really, really biased answer. I mean, I've always said governments will embrace blockchain, but whether they will embrace crypto is a really good question, honestly, because for all the opinions, all the conversations we need to have for the US legal opinions, and all the conversations we need to have with regulators, or even for basic bank accounts, I'm always like, yeah, this is pretty antiquated, and they don't really understand the value proposition, right? Like I tried to top up my fiat bank account a little bit the other day, and my bank did some KYC AML on me, and they said, "Hey, where do these funds come from?" And I said, "Well, I did some sick yield farming." And they said, "What's yield farming?" And I said, "Well, I provided money and liquidity, and I got a lot of extra money for it in return." They said, "Is that not a Ponzi?" I said, "Well, one could argue that a lot of these farms have Ponzonomics integrated. On the other hand, hey, it's perfectly liquid. I sold it. You can perfectly tell on chain where the money is coming from. But even then, they don't understand. So, are they going to embrace it? It's going to be very expensive for them to understand it. And obviously, knowing that, I think banning it is, to be honest, easier for a lot of these people than regulating it.
Sure,
And we're
makes
just a
sense.
drop in the bucket at the end of the day, right? We're trying to believe that we in crypto are so huge and so important that governments need to work with us. But what is our total market capitalization? Tesla on its own has a larger market capitalization than the entirety of crypto, and that's a car maker. Sorry,
Yeah,
Tesla
yeah.
fans.
All right, cool. Awesome. Do you read books?
No, no,
No. Okay.
I just read blog posts by Samson
Oh,
and other DeFi protocol politicians, such as Ethereum is a dark forest and so forth. That's my non-fictional, or actually non-fictional enjoyment.
where I'd be curious to get your take on the upcoming narratives, right? I mean, the DeFi was obviously the biggest one, and recently there's been NFTs. For some reason, that's coming up hot. What do you think of NFT? Are we going to see NFTs on Phantom?
NFTs on fan, hard to say. Hard to say. I mean, we're having some conversations, but it's not at the point yet where I would say, yes, this is the future. I like this. It's more exploratory for now. I do actually enjoy the Ethereum based NFT space, but that's mostly for meme value, right? Because I think a lot of the NFTs, like I think Chats Limited and some stuff on Rarible, it's a lot of throwbacks and memes to 2017 and 2018 to a lot of advisors and teams and people who squeezed out retail completely and now coming back for more. Now DeFi is a thing, right? So I mean, I actually bought some of those NFTs for sentimental value, but it still feels a little bit weird because I'm still having a hard time putting a finger on what the actual value of NFT is, right? Like right nowadays, it seems like you issue an Andre Cronje or a Wi-Fi NFT and it just goes to 100 evaluations, which is absolutely crazy. Like it's just a freaking meme, but then tokenized.
I think it's
But
gonna be exciting to see where it goes. There's what I
yeah,
like about them is that there's a fun aspect to it, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's fun. It's fun to make money with yield farming, but it's much more technical. And with
yeah,
NFTs, it's like visual, and the people
yeah.
maybe wanna collect them, and there's some kind of hunt to get some of the rarest ones. So I think there's like some gamification aspect that's interesting.
Yeah, and also if we start seeing them as digital art, so to say, I guess then we can put some valuation on there, right? I'm very big art lover myself, right? Like say, like how do you determine the value of a Banksy, right? Or even more modern artists like Takashi Murakami or the cause side of things, right? Like the valuation on those things is ridiculous as well, but they have a valuation because, well, supply and demand, and people love the way these things looks. They want to have the original, they want to send it to museum for exhibition purposes. Then it's a thing. Like they have all the ecosystem tools necessary for that art to be somewhat useful, I guess, or the you can utilize them, I guess, because you can borrow it to a museum, you can put it out for exhibition, and other people can enjoy it, right? But with NFTs, that's not necessarily there, right? There's not like a VR viewing gallery to view my NFTs in 3D or whatever. Like that, none of that's there yet. For now, it's literally just internet points.
Yeah, I mean,
So we'll see how that space develops, right? Like if more
yeah.
ecosystem tools are built, and lower lower entry barrier for VR, then it might be pretty cool.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Any last words about Fantom?
Last words about Fantom. I have to be careful so my community doesn't say I'm funding Fantom. Yeah, well, I would like to thank everyone, I guess, for participating, right? Like, I mean, we didn't really expect many people to partake or engage with FUSD and wrapped FTM in the early days because there was no yield opportunity. We were like, people are just going to stay in staking because that's where the financial incentive is. And then we look at what happens, and a lot of people move from staking into FUSD, even though there's no yield opportunity in FUSD. And we're like, what's happening? Why are people doing this? And what we saw is that people were genuinely interested in the tech and they were testing on production together with us. So that was awesome, really. So I would like to thank everyone who has for participating in the ecosystem.
Awesome. That's great to hear. A great and active community is one of the things you need for sure in crypto.
Yeah, I mean, but I also want to be so bold to say, right? Like, you need a great and active community, but we also need to do some technical min maxing. And we also need to focus on quality, right? Because I recently addressed it that the community was becoming more active. If you look at Twitter engagement, Telegram engagement, Discord engagement, that's great. But I actually feel like the quality of conversation went down a little bit, right? Because I have seen a lot of awesome community members brigading on a lot of tweets from Andre, Jörn, like Daryl, Blue Kirby, and so forth, and Eminence Finance recently, right? Which was another topic, right? Which we didn't end so well. And well, they spam FTM related content where there may not be an FTM synergy, right? So I always try to explain that what makes sense on top of Phantom's blockchain should happen there, and what makes sense on Ethereum should happen there. And for now, for example, a Yearn, which is an aggregation layer, makes sense on ETH because that's where the yield opportunity is. There's no yield opportunity yet on Phantom, so why would you move over the aggregation layer, right? So another message I'd say to our community and to a lot of other communities as well that believe that brute forcing engagement is a good thing, it's not really. Like, let's focus on quality, let's focus on organic conversation, right? Because if you look at Ethereum's DeFi ecosystem, they don't need 2018 style shills to get through. They just need quality governance and real organic participation to get where they are. And honestly, it makes me very happy to participate in ETH-based DeFi application governance because I know people are in it for the right reasons.
I'll add a fun thing maybe, since I read all the messages on our public chat in the community as well. And it's a general purpose community, right? So people are free to talk about any project they want. And reading the chat every day, I've noticed some patterns. And there are actually a few projects that I won't name, but they're getting talked about like on a regular basis. And I have high suspicion that it is not organic, that is actually fake accounts made by the team, or maybe, community members that want to push the project, and they fake conversations with a few accounts to try to make it seem organic. And
Yeah.
they essentially push the project name like every other day in the community. And
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because it's very obvious. And it can be, there's good and bad to it, right? It can be interesting because sometimes they do bring good information in the project when they make up these conversations. But at the same time, it's like these guys, again, it's like kind of funny for myself because I know what they're up to. But I don't know if some people can find it annoying. Maybe it's also because of the market, since there's so many opportunities around. It makes people like more excited and maybe more focused on the short term, and maybe that changes kind of the tone of the messages that we see overall. And people are just, look at this, look at that, and they care less maybe about like more in-depth discussions when they don't have much time because there's so much
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, I mean, people, yeah, I mean, it's the same, right? Like, people say, yeah, bull market's amazing and bear market's horrible, right? But I mean, most of the good things I like in terms of building and people I've met, people I've gotten close to, those were in the bear market, man. You find your clique, you find your friends, you find your colleagues and team members. And a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I'll keep building for the next 10 years. When bull market hits, I'm going to keep persevering. And then, bam, bull market comes. They're suddenly stinking rich overnight. And they're like, oh, I didn't say that, man. goodbye. I was like, dude, where are you going? So a lot of the 2017 and 2018 people I met, they actually recently left, whether it's industry colleagues, whether it's other community members, other guys who I used to see in governance, like they just retired. And that's sad to see, because those were the quality people, in my opinion, or some of them, right? And the people coming back now are are the people who didn't get enough previously and who aren't here to participate or contribute, but are here to leech off. So I don't really like these current market conditions necessarily, to be honest. I kind of miss the bear, and I kind of hope we can go back to bear, so Solidity developers don't cost $500,000 a year for junior experience, and so we can actually start hiring people again. That would be nice.
All right, so you said you weren't going to fund Phantom, but you just funded all crypto, hoping we're going to go into a bear market.
Yeah, exit all markets.
All right.
Just kidding. Not financial advice.
Thank you, Michael, for your time. It was fun to talk about Phantom and crypto in general. I'd be happy to do that again in some time when you have more stuff on the way, more things rolled out in Afghanistan, maybe FUSD on Ethereum, and maybe some surprises.
Yeah, let me know, Alex. Happy to always come back on or bring on some other people as well. And let's keep this rolling.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. See you soon.
All right. Cheers, man.